Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for coming in. I'm going to let more people fill in here. This is going to be a great discussion. I am excited. And thank you again to our panelists for taking time out of your schedule. I would first like to say happy Monday and thank you for everyone for joining us for this important industry discussion. I am Morgan Gayles. I serve as the manager of audience development for BizBash, and I'm honored to be joined by this powerhouse lineup of event innovators. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. If there are any pressing conversation questions or topics that you'd like the panelists to touch upon, please feel free to ask away in the Q&A tab. We will be hosting an open audience Q&A for the last 15 minutes of today's discussion. Also, there will be an on-demand recording sent over to everyone following the conversation, so be sure to check your emails for that link in your inbox. I would first like to introduce the entire panelists, and thank you all again for joining us. First, we have Eris T. Sims. She serves as the Chief of Staff for the NAACP. Next, we have Jason Dunn, the Group Vice President of Diversity Sales and Inclusion for the Cincinnati, USA CDB. He also serves as the Chairman for the National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals. I'd also like to welcome Todd Hawkins, President of the Todd Group, one of the leading event management and consulting firms in Los Angeles. And last but not least, please welcome Yvonne Mcnair, the Chief Experience Officer at Captivate Marketing Group. I'd like to kick things off by having everyone introduce themselves again with your bios, and then follow up with a question of how you're doing and what you've been up to in these last few weeks during quarantine and things of that nature. Eris, if you'd like to start us off.
Sure. Thank you, Morgan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Morgan said, I'm Eris Sims. I'm the Chief of Staff for the NAACP. And I've been with the organization about 5 years. Prior to that, I worked for the Links Incorporated as their Director of Meetings, as well as the Executive Director. My hospitality background was with Hyatt Hotels, specifically Hyatt Regency Atlanta, as Associate Director of Catering for a number of years, and with Merritt's Travel Company. As Chief of Staff for the NAACP, I handle all things civil rights, dealing with our President and CEO, as well as working very closely with our meetings team. And for the past 4 months, it's been a very trying time for our country. And of course, the NAACP being 111 years old, the oldest civil rights organization, it's been a very trying time for us. We all started out in this pandemic, and of course, with the last month and everything happening, I am personally a bit overworked, overstressed, and overwhelmed. I must be real, but we keep persevering, we keep going, and we get it done as we always do.
Thank you, Eris. Overworked and stressed. I think we all can agree with that.
Gotta keep it real.
Right. Jason, if you'd like to go ahead and give us your bio and tell us how you've been doing.
Yeah, so I'm Jason Dunn, as stated, Chairman of the National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals. Have been in this role for a year, been a member of the organization since 16 years, I guess, since I started into the industry. We are solely focused on the education and upliftment of African-American professionals in hospitality. All of our organizations were created with the uplift and movement in mind of speaking truth to power and expecting results. We represent over 1,000 hospitality professionals from what has been convention directors and executive directors to suppliers, hotels, convention centers, and CVBs. But we have expanded that this past year to all Black hospitality professionals. So as we broaden our perspective and push and resources, the goal again is to uplift, educate, motivate, and if we have to irritate folks to in the pursuit of making sure equity is a part of the conversation. My role that pays me is the Cincinnati, USA Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I'm solely focused on making sure Cincinnati is positioned as a multicultural destination of choice for all. And we've been successful in the last 16 years with the help of Coalition, the NAACP, and other organizations that have chosen Cincinnati as a destination. But I'm here officially as the chair of the NCBMP, and will speak as such.
Awesome. Thank you. Miss Yvonne, would you like to give us a little bit more of your background and tell us how you've been doing?
Sure. So my name is Yvonne Mcnair. I'm the CEO for Captivate Marketing Group. We are a full service production agency focused mostly around live events, working with the entertainment industry. So we do some of everything, but concerts, festivals, those are really our sweet space. I've been in events for about 20 years now and have a small team. In terms of how I'm doing, it's been hard because, first we had COVID, and for someone who produces live events, all of my events were pretty much canceled or switched over to virtual, and I love live events. And then, with everything happening with, the civil uprising and the protests, it's been hard. It's been an emotional roller coaster for myself as well as my team. And still trying to just push forward and, keep the business moving. So it's been tough.
Yes, it's been tough for all of us. Todd, if you can give us your background and how have you been doing?
Sure, absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Hawkins, president of the Todd Group, an event management production consulting firm here in Los Angeles. I have been in the events industry now for about 15 years. Also the managing partner of Hawkins Makita, a social impact firm, helping to make social impact for clients across the board who have influence and platform. And so during quarantine, and during this whole time, I've been dealing with everything that's happening and trying to pivot and trying to put myself into the right place at the right time. And then, after trying to help those organizations and individuals who wanted to help during COVID, both within our event industry and then also the community at large, having to then now pivot to the racial pandemic in our country, it's been a lot. But I'm really inspired and motivated more than anything because the time is now that it's come and there's a wake-up call finally. And I think that we as professionals are in a really great place to be as Black professionals to really take hold of this opportunity and move forward. So I'm inspired.
Awesome. Well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. Todd, you kind of hit on it. So what do you think racial diversity really brings to our industry itself?
Well, racial diversity is so important, but what it brings to the event industry specifically is culture. It brings, it is that very thing that is so necessary. You cannot really produce events or any live experience without understanding and realizing that our culture is part of it in some way, shape, or form. Everything from music to food to art, creativity, to venues, to the place, the location, all of it. It is so ingrained in live events and experiences, but even more so, you think about events as being a call to action of sorts. So whether it's a music festival or a nonprofit dinner or conference, there's some type of call to action, or even a social event in that case with family and friends. There's a moment to do something and a moment to act. And I think that when you step back and look at how that connects and how that affects the industry as a whole, there's never been more of an important time for that diversity. But we are a community that is so rich and diverse that we've been doing this work and we've been in it. Now it's time to pull everyone to the forefront and show the world who those, amazing event professionals are that help to make and build and create this event sphere.
Gotcha. And I would like everybody jump in wherever you feel need. And so with that being said, is there an area or what specifically can you all think of where our industry gets it wrong when it comes to racial diversity?
I think there's a perspective. Go ahead, Eris.
I'll go after you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So to Todd's point, not only is there culture, but there's an economic impact to all of this. Diversity spend within the hospitality industry is $300 billion, 300 billion with a B dollars, right? So I think the impact of that alone signifies that we are a force to be reckoned with. Black folks alone spend $1.3 trillion as consumers, with a lot of the brands that have recently said that they support Black Lives Matter and or are supporting equity. I think what the industry is getting wrong or needs help on is the difference of defining equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think we focus on diversity as a buzzword, and we hide the intended cause that we're talking about within that umbrella, not really understanding that equity is really what folks are talking about. So when people say they want diversity, they're saying they want equity from power. They want, we deserve and need the budget that aligns with that, the authority and the autonomy as well as our same persons who reflect our organizations or have the same titles. So I think there's a difference of how we use it. What we should be saying in the industry is how do we find equity amongst all of the categories, all of the various levels of hospitality professionalism, and all of the groups that are in discussion. So again, I think the ROI, $300 billion, understanding equity versus diversity, and I think the collective empowerment of uplift within the industry, if all these things come to place, there wouldn't be any room for people to be marginalized as we are currently.
Gotcha. Ms. Eris?
That was a mouthful, absolutely. Everything Todd and Jason said. But just to add to that, you look at it from a few different lenses. You know, as a client, you walk in, how does the event industry get it wrong? As a client, you walk into a vendor, a facility, and you don't see any people that look like me in leadership. I go in to have a meeting with the general manager of any type of vendor, whether it's a catering service or a hotel. There's no one there that looks like me. So we tend to get it wrong when we don't have the right cultures represented at the table. So we need to start there, because that's one reason that we can start to get it right, or one way we can start to get it right. Jason touched on marketing budgets and such. When it comes to cities allocating different budgets for different events, allocate the same amount of dollars to the minority or to the Black events, because $300 billion is huge. Right. So we have a tremendous impact. The cities should be allocating the appropriate amount of dollars to promote and enhance those Black events that they do to the non-Black or non-minority events. And also when going into a city, a vendor list is huge. Cities get it wrong because I pick a venue, but the preferred vendor list doesn't have any minorities on the list. So now I've got to fight to bring in a minority caterer or a minority AV company or whatever it may be, so that other people can have an opportunity to work here when there is a long vendor list of approved vendors with no minorities. So that's a couple of ways.
Ms. Yvonne, would you like to weigh in?
I definitely want to weigh in. I'm like jumping rope. But yeah, I wanted to say that, you know, first of all, where they get it wrong is not thinking that we produce at the same level that they produce at. So many times, you know, and I just posted about this, I have, you know, the best credentials that you can even think of. I've produced for some of the best talent, for some of the best brands, but constantly I have to prove myself over and over again. And so there's this thinking that we don't produce at the same level that they do. So a lot of times when you're seeing those big productions, they're not even calling on us. There was a huge production, and I won't say what the name of it was, but there was a huge production in Atlanta, and I was very surprised it was a Black production, and I was very surprised that it was a white producer. And the same list that I'm on, the same list that a lot of my peers are on, but we weren't even called. So where the industry gets it wrong is thinking that we aren't at the same level that they are. And we constantly, as in any industry, we have to do so much more. We have to prove ourselves over and over again. So that's a big thing. And then another thing I want to just add, and I'll keep it quick, but just another thing that where they get us wrong is, you know, not even giving us the opportunity to bid. There are so many times that we don't even get the RFP, you know, we don't even know what's happening until it's already happening. So just, again, just across the board, just not really thinking about us when it comes to some of these events.
Gotcha. Now, Ms. Eris, you had touched on something about leadership looking like you. One of the questions that was submitted from our audience prior was, how can you actively engage with leadership where there's no diversity and they don't think it's necessary? So that can be within your own organization or even when you're going into different cities looking to produce a program. And this is for anybody.
Well, I think if you're going into a city and you obviously want minority leadership anywhere, but if you're going into a city and they don't think it's important, you should probably pick a different city. Now, if you work there, that's obviously a little different, but then you have to take it upon yourself to actively engage, be visible, develop those mentor relationships, those sponsor relationships. Sometimes we have to step outside of our comfort zone to get to where we need to be. Have the conversations that you need to have to get into the groups that you need to be in. And it's going to take a little work because this is very different for everybody right now. Yeah. You know, oftentimes you walk into a hotel or a city, you don't see a lot of people that look like Jason. You just don't. So it's very good to have minorities, Black people in particular, but Black and brown people in those seats, because when we are in those leadership seats, the city or the venue is very likely to get things right versus doing something wrong and having to go back and correct it later. So we all need to be represented, and that means inclusion. That's not just diversity, that's inclusion, having a seat at the table and feeling comfortable enough to be included and have the correct conversations.
Sure.
Yeah, in addition to what Eris was saying, I think we have to be unapologetically ready to know our own value in order to make the ask. And a lot of times we go in and make the ask, but we're not steadfast in what we're asking for, and we bend or compromise.
That's
so
real.
Your own value, right? Two, at some point, folks have to speak up with the business case again of why it's important to have representation. The census already shows that it's going to be a minority majority country in the next 5 to 10 years. In some spaces, it already is already, right? So at some point, cities have to understand, and so do hotels and other venues, that there are the way of being a monolithic staff, frankly, is outdated, and it's not in touch with what's going on in the rest of the world. So I think if folks want to be progressive, they want business, you as a customer have to first understand your own value, be fast what you're asking for, and not compromise. And if they don't want to do business with you, then or they say they want to do business with you, but don't understand how to do it. There's ways to teach them too, as was Eris stated too. So there's different ways to do this, but we first have to understand our value and be steadfast in what we're asking for, not compromise. And whatever that means to you, it has to be authentic.
Gotcha. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that question? Because I have a good follow-up. Okay, so what are the first steps in moving towards a more inclusive and diverse event industry, since we're going to kind of progress there? Yvonne, Todd?
Sure. I'll start. I think one of the things is that, hire us, like, let us know what's out there, hire us, include us. And, we hear, everyone talk about having a seat at the table, but I think it's more important than just having a seat at the table. I want to actually be on the agenda. I want to be able to have a voice when I'm at the table, because sometimes when we're in those rooms, we're there so they can say, we're at the table, but we don't have the same voice. I mean, there are so many times when I am producing events where, people are trying to tell me what our culture will appreciate. And I'm like, I think I know my culture. I think I know what we're going to like. So I want to be able to be heard. So I think it's just important to just start including us by hiring us and giving us the opportunity, the same shots that you're giving other people.
Sure. Todd?
I think that it's like you said, Yvonne, it's hire us, but it's also kind of back to what Jason said. It's like acknowledge that we exist, but also acknowledge the problem within the organization and within the industry. within the industry is like, we have a problem and we have to fix it. You know, having a seat at the table is important. Putting more Blacks into leadership roles at the board level is so important. So particularly, we have so many professional organizations and associations. It is time for those doors of those associations and industry orgs to open up and put Black board members at the helm, to also make certain that these venues are really starting to bring in Black event professionals to their vendor list, but also inviting them to create relationships. So it's more than just checking the box. But we need to be in those seats of power, to Yvonne's point, where we're helping to make those decisions. And I will say that we have also, I think, with our own frustration, have gotten to a point where we've started to build some of our own associations and groups, which is also important. In Los Angeles, I'm part of the founding group of the Black Table, which is a group of Black event professionals here in Los Angeles who are really working on helping to bring together Black event professionals together. And we did this because we saw that we weren't being invited to sit at the table. So we decided to create our own table. But our priority is not just to stay in our own siloed group, but instead to go out and disrupt every organization and association that does not have representation, more than one, at those tables of power and influence. And so we have to mobilize and strategize with each other. So it's important for Black event professionals to really stretch our arms out to one another right now, to say, how can we do this effectively together? Because we know the power, you know, if we have more than one, you are going to get more done. So
I think all of what each of them have stated, in the addition of, we have to force people to look at their mission statements. And if the mission statements are not inclusive of Black folks, that's one thing. But if their mission statements are inclusive of all, we have to challenge them on that. And I think we have to allow people to broaden their perspective, whether they're allies or within the community, to really have an understanding of what the ROI is and what the value of doing the right thing is right now in this day and era. Additionally, the diversity consultants whom are around, or people who are experts in this conversation, even the people like Yvonne or Todd or Eris who have the subject matter expertise to have the discussions, once they're talking to the persons who are making these decisions, they have to listen to them and then implement the strategies that they are talking about within the foundation or the fabric of the organization. And frankly, if there are people whom are not willing to receive what they're saying, then that leadership has to rid the organization of those persons to create a different culture. I think, and then lastly, you have to apply or put resources together with the recommendations that were given from experts and carry them out, and with some metrics that support it. Not just because you say they're going to do it, but some long-term sustainable resources that support it. And you have to call into question if your organization is really about what it said it's about. And if it isn't, then we need to call them out.
Ms. Yvonne, did you want to weigh in, or because I have another follow-up for that?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Jason, you had said something about their mission statement. Do you think that organizations should have had or should now implement more diversity and inclusion competence trainings for their staff or their senior leaders? And
so I have my theory on that, and I hope I don't offend anybody. If I do, then God bless you, and we'll be all right tomorrow. So here's what I believe in that when people say I'm going through unconscious bias training and diversity training, et cetera, that's a 1 day, maybe 2 day seminar, but there's no strategy to sustain it or to take what you have cried about or got a cup of tears from folks that really, okay, we had a pizza and we talked about it, you feel good, I feel good, we go home, and you still wear your Confederate flag on your shoulder when you get to the house tomorrow, the next day. So but there isn't any substantial discussion about it. So I laugh when people try to chuckle or say, okay, you are a culture vulture. You're just saying that now because it feels good as everyone's talking about it, but what is your plan? So for me, I would say the unconscious bias conversation that folks are running to saying they're having, I think is bullshit, sorry, because there's no there's no strategy behind it that sustains it long term. And it has to be both. Has to be both to make it a relevant conversation, but for long-term plan sustains it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's real. It has to have strategy. Anybody can sit through a day or 2-day training session on diversity and what they need to be doing correctly. Right. But if there's no strategy behind it and actually holding organizations accountable for the next steps, and it means that we have to step up and likely help create those action plans to move forward, because there's likely no one else to do it. So we have to be willing to take the initiative to take us to that next step and show the leadership in a particular organization what they need to be doing.
Right. Absolutely. I just wanted to jump in on this as well. First of all, Jason, I love everything you said. I want to say that. And then secondly, you know, I want to quote Deion Jones. He's a activist, and he said, "This isn't Black Lives Matter Spirit Month." And so we're excited that people are happy right now. We're really excited about that. We are. However, we need to talk about long-term strategy. We need to figure out, you know, what is the plan and how we can really make change. And I think that it was great, you know, because I'm part of, you know, work with the music industry. We had the Blackout Tuesday, you know, where everyone, you know, put the black and, you know, the black poster up on their Instagram, and they made all these statements and everything. But then, you know, we have to call these companies out, because there are several brands that I work with. There are no people on their executive team. There are no people on their boards. They don't hire Black vendors. You know, they're putting these statements out, which are great, but you have to now back it up. And I think it is up to us to push companies to back it up.
Mm-hmm. So you said something about statements, and that is actually my next question. So with all that has happened and transpired over the last maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks now, what are your thoughts on the statements that have been made by organizations and those that have not, for the lack thereof? Some of our loving brands that we can go to every day has made a statement that sways one way or the other. How does that affect our industry and, you know, us totality? Anybody can jump in on that one. Todd?
I think the statements are good. I mean, we're in this moment where everybody's making a statement or making a donation or doing both.
Right.
However, what happens in a few days or in a few weeks after we've forgotten about the Instagram and the social media posts and the money's still there? It's still about actions. What is the company going to do to support the statement that they put out in June?
Sure.
And it's up to all of us to hold those companies accountable for the next steps. And again, have the conversations with the leadership. We're working on several things right now with several different companies to get there, because obviously diversity is lacking across the board. So we've got to get these companies to where they need to be. And we can't let this moment just pass us by. It can't stop. You know, we got to keep things flowing on social media, in the news. We got to continue to have this conversation until real change is made.
I agree.
I agree. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, the statement is one thing, but if anything, it is an indicator for us to see, okay, well, they're the ones who are saying that they're going to make a difference, so that they care. They're good ones to watch. Put them on the list so that we can see in about 2 to 6 months if they are actually making the proactive steps to still be about the statement that they put out. And to that point, you know, we have so many corporate entities within the event industry. So from catering companies to hotels and venues to production companies that are corporate boards. I am waiting to see who is invited to sit at that table. If those boardrooms will change at the major rental companies that have offices across this entire country that all of us use, let's see that. That's what I want to see beyond the statement.
Okay. Jason?
I am in agreement with everything everyone said. I know we sound like a preacher to the choir, but you know, there's some You know, the funny thing about, and I posted this a while ago. I said, listen, the same companies, Eris is laughing because I'm trying to contain myself. But there are a lot of companies whom I've posted, whom we know their track record does not hold up to what the posts are saying. And again, I am very, people who are in my circle of influence will tell you, I am very big on calling folk out, particularly if you are using this moment to, in my words, manipulate the people whom have been harmed and the communities whom are just asking to be treated like a human being. And for you just to position your company as if you support it when your past actions do not, that deems you as someone who's a part of the problem. So you need to be called out, held to task, asked for metrics, and essentially what people are asking for: your board, your C-suite, your spend in the minority community. What is the morale of your staff that you say that you publicly support? We want all that. And then when we have that, then let us make a decision if you truly stand by what your banner or your post say.
Okay. Now this is a question I have personally. Miss Yvonne, you work with those in the music industry and things of that nature. How has everything that has transpired, because in my opinion, that's still something that is connected to the hospitality industry, as well as we seek out, for concerts and things of that nature. How has everything that has taken place with everyone weighing in and making their statement for the moment, how has that been for you as someone who produces these mass festivals and things of that nature?
Yeah, like I said, I find it very interesting. I mean, usually when I show up, I'm the only woman and the only Black woman. And so it's interesting to me, to see these statements. So I'm like now at this point, because I'm, tired. So I'm not waiting for the invite. I'm reaching out to them, asking for my invite. And, I'm really pushing companies that, I know have no diversity. I do a lot of mentoring for young Black women to try and bring them into the production side. So, asking them to allow some of these people to, get a chance and, see productions and stuff like that, so we can increase diversity. So I'm doing my part to try and help them along, as opposed to waiting to see what they're going to do. I'm definitely being very proactive in that.
Understood. I want to switch a little bit back over to hospitality and tourism. So one of the questions that I was received is there is a big issue that we've been hearing is that Black vendors do not get the same event budgets or do not get preferred on vendor lists for venues. Do you see that or have any ideas of what can be done to change that? We have a lot of event vendors currently watching us right now, and just kind of weigh in on that. That can be for anybody.
Well, I think the first thing that I would encourage them to do is be a part of their local or state African American Chamber of Commerce. I think the second piece would be that we have to empower individuals that can make decisions to be inclusive to do that, and not be scared to speak up to ensure that there's equity in the bidding process and those who actually get the contract. And lastly, I think the producers or the persons who are over services or whomever is the conduit between the contractors and the end user has to have the database to support the conversation. And they have to be empowered to do that. And if they're not, then the people whom are actually signing the contract need to demand that there is a person of color or Black person or Black vendor that gets it. And until that happens, the cycle of, or the pipeline to convert an RFP or a proposal into a contract is never going to be definitive, because the person at the end has to demand that there is an equal opportunity for all.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, that's what Jason said is very real. The person signing really has to demand it. That happened to us a few years ago in Cincinnati. We were booking the museum, And the museum, I think, didn't have a minority caterer on the list, on the preferred list. You know, what's the name of the museum, Jason?
I'm telling you, 'cause you put me on Front Street.
Yeah. But we demanded that we find a minority caterer in Cincinnati. You can't tell me there's not somebody there that can do what we need to do. So we were able to find not necessarily a Black or brown caterer that could do it, but we did find a woman-owned company that we were able to use, but we were determined to give our people, to give a minority company that business. You have to be, as the signer, you have to demand it. You have to go out and find it, or find the company. And it may take a little extra work, because in the immediacy, you may not have that preferred vendor list from a company, because the minority companies just aren't on there. You have to do the extra work, find the company, bring them in, and get them exposed. It's up to all of us to make this work.
And here's what happened. So in 08, when NAACP came, not to take over the conversation, she did exactly what she just stated in 08, and 16 did it again. In 08, that contract with diverse or Black vendors still exists today. So even though they weren't there after they left the convention to come to the city, that maintained or sustained that type of model within the convention center that still lasts today, because they fought for it. And they made sure that the conversation was there. So again, these things are not just for the moment, they're long-lasting models where we can use in future years.
And we do it across the board. We do it wherever we go, whatever venue it is, whether it's a convention center, even in hotels sometimes, we push buttons, and of course, at various venues across each city. So you have to have that voice and speak out for those minority vendors in the city that you're in.
Todd, do you, for any of the events that you help produce and market, are you specifically going after people of color or African-American vendors as well? Is that something that is?
Absolutely. And I think that is another issue as well, is creating those opportunities as individuals who have that power and that influence as producers to bring those vendors along with us as we are given those opportunities. It was something that I was talking with some other colleagues, the importance of helping to shed light on some of these amazing vendors who, have been doing the work, but as to Eris's point, are not on the list. Many don't maybe know about them, but it's time to start carrying those other folks with you. That's why being part of organizations and groups or associations with people that look like you can also walk with them and take them with you and introduce them to those clients. I think that it is extremely important for us, to Yvonne's point of we can't sit and wait for them to find us, because they never are. Even though we're here, even though they say they see us, we also have to do that work of saying, I'm here, I'm gonna invite myself. And if you choose to ignore my outreach, then that gives me a really great signal. I don't need to do business with you. I don't need to be associated with you. But we at least need to use this opportunity as professionals to get out there and tell people who we are and show them, and let them know that we're willing to do the work. We want to do the work. We can do the work.
Yeah. Can I just chime in on this? One of the things that I also do is, because I like Todd, I will try and find, Black vendors when I am producing events to try and bring them on. But I also want to say that, sometimes they're not ready. So what I try to do also is help Black vendors so that they can get the proper licensing, so that they can have the proper documentation to go into some of these larger venues, because I don't feel that at all times they have the right resources to get to where they need to be. So since I have everything that I need, I try and help people so that they can get to the level that they can be in these bigger spaces. So that's one of the things I do for, smaller vendors. There are caterers that, don't have the proper, so I'll ask a white caterer to partner with them so that they can still get some of the business and still be in the space. So that's one of the things. But I also want to just kind of jump to what you said about the budgets, is that, many times the budgets that I'm seeing, I'm getting, a third of what other people are getting and expected to do the exact same event. And if I don't do the exact same event with less money, then I'm not as good as they are, even though they had a bigger budget. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed in terms of, the budgets that we get to produce the event. And I think there's a lack of trust, thinking that we won't be able to, produce, and they're wasting money when they would, throw the money out the door for someone else. So, and definitely has to be addressed in terms of how we get our budgets, how we get our fees. They're often not equal. So that's something that definitely needs to be addressed within the industry.
I think that also talks about, Yvonne, what you just stated is very real in all spectrums of hospitality, particularly if you're Black, that we get less of a budget and more responsibility and supposed to be as good as, or if not better than, the ones who have more money, less talent, and just enough responsibility. So I think that's a mentally daunting thing that we deal with as Black professionals, and I think we have to talk more about it because we suffer in silence mentally, and not really allowed to express ourselves in a way that is received in light that is professional. So I think that's a whole different webinar. I think it's a whole different conversation. I think
we'll be here all day.
Yeah, so that's all I had to say. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, you're fine.
I've said enough already.
So hire us is what I'm hearing mostly. Hire more people of color, not just Black people, but people of color in its totality. But the question is now, how do we inspire more minority students to want to be in our industry, have a career in events, hospitality, and then even how can we kind of maneuver it so that it's not shown as only women can be event planners, because I know there are plenty strong men that are event planners as well.
Let me say this, and again, y'all may hang up on me or kick me out the meeting. But I have a real difficulty with that slogan, hire me, because here's what's happening. We know that there are some of our people who are hired just because they're Black, and that's their value, their pigmentation, and they are put in roles with titles, and usually are the reasons that most Black folks don't get contracts and or torpedoed in a way within the office where we're put against each other. So I think folks have to be careful what you ask for, because all of us at some point of our professional life have been in a room with someone who we know has no business being in a room, but is hired because of the pigmentation and not because of their intelligence. So I think we got to be clear on what we're asking for. Second, I think building a pipeline into the hospitality industry, I didn't take a traditional way. I came from a different perspective with event planning and doing parties, frankly, in college, and being involved in the political scene, and got invited to the conversation via resources and networks that a lot of folks may not have had the access to. So I think we have to accept there's different ways to get into the industry, but at some point, to sustain yourself, you have to have at least the core values of self-respect and the soft skills of just saying hello and getting some kinds of professionalism about yourself. Again, the alignment with HBCUs that have hospitality programs, of course, is number one. Two, we have to expose our students in city schools who are of color to this industry. We have a partnership in Cincinnati where we're working with high school students to get them involved from the 11th grade all the way up through college, where we internships, co-ops, et cetera, to get them involved on every level. And I think we have to be careful too, because a lot of entry points into our industry come from cooking and cleaning. We get stuck there. So we got to be very deliberate on what we're asking for. Are we asking for access to C-suite, mid-level, directors, front desk, entrepreneurs like Yvonne and Todd, or what are we asking for? So we have to be direct, and we have to have some type of pipeline that sustains that from a very young level all the way to when they actually actualize and give back at the same time.
Sure.
Absolutely. I agree with everything Jason said. It's not about just hiring us, because as Jason said, many of us are hired. We are the first people that you see because we're the doorman in a hotel and we're serving food. We are there. We are the majority of the people in the hotel, but we're not in the boardroom at the hotel. And for our people, we're loyal. So we will get that doorman job or that banquet job, and we will stay there for 30 or 40 years. So after we've been hired, it's a matter of promoting us. We have to take it upon ourselves to find those right circles, have those conversations, get mentors, get sponsors. We all succeed and we excel because of having access. It's access to the general manager, access to the C-suite. If you don't have access, you have challenges and you don't get what you need to get. You need to know who to talk to get what you need to get. So know exactly who those C-suite members are and what path do you need to take to get there? Because many of us do get a little comfortable. And we're in an era of having many different pipelines into the industry. As Jason said, he took, a little different path. Some people stumble upon it. Right now, there are schools, people are majoring in hospitality events, and there's so many branches of hospitality. So we also have to get mentors and sponsors for those people coming up and studying the industry right now to make sure that they're on the right path and they're meeting the right people that they need to meet as well.
And I want to add to that is the importance of these bigger and larger production companies and caterers to open the door and allow your internships to be inclusive. That is another strong way to make a change and a shift. Talk about just providing the opportunity. I can't tell you how many internships I tried to get in my, college years, where the competition was so fiercely white, and that those opportunities weren't made available. But make a concerted effort to have an internship seat for a Black student or a Black, up and coming professional. Help to teach them and show them. I must say that I benefited, my career in events was because of a white mentor, a woman named Hillary Harris, who was at Warner Brothers Special Events. She was the head of special events at Warner Brothers. And she opened the door, made certain I had a seat in her office, continued to groom me after that internship was over, made it a point to invest back into me. She introduced me to BizBash. She connected me to David Adler. If it was not for her investing in me, I would not be in this room today on this Zoom chat. So it's important that we create opportunities, but for our colleagues who are not Black, you have an opportunity to open that door and to mentor someone. And you can change the course and the trajectory of one person's career by doing just that. There are plenty of Black students who want to be in the event profession. I've never seen a shortage, to be quite honest. But you have to create those opportunities. And I'm sorry, paid internships. Paid.
Oh, yes, sir. We'll write that down, paid. Ms. Yvonne?
I mean, I've already said, that I offer, I mentor, I personally don't look for mentors. I look for advocates, people who can be out and talk about the work that I do and, expose me and if they're in the rooms, talk me up. But I do a lot around mentoring myself because a lot of times, people just don't know if they don't see the opportunity. I mean, I've been around the world several times doing what I do. So I really try to show people that there's a lot, that you can do in the event industry. So, especially from a production standpoint. So.
Okay, awesome. So this was a quick question that was asked in the chat, but I think Todd hit on it, is paid internships. The question was, what are some things we can do if we're not in a hiring position in terms of employment for hiring vendors to effectively or to affect positive change in the industry, not only just with internships?
Well, I think, again, like we do here is a shadowing program. I mean, we have folks come in and they may stay 6-7 weeks with us, and they may get what we call experiential learning. We have several students who follow us around for the music festival here in Cincinnati, which is the largest R&B in the country. We're the oldest as well. So, I mean, so there's some practical things, just having people around and doing things, but also people have to be willing to accept those type of roles as well before you get to the cash piece too. So again, I started with the Riverfront Classic, which is an HBCU football game, classic game in Ohio before it was canceled. I didn't get paid. I mean, I was here. That was my first experience into kind of understanding what's going on this side, and all the resources that I met actually helped catapult me to the role I'm in, in addition to some other allies within the organization. So, I mean, there's a give and take to this. You got to learn before you can get that check, and you get the check, you got to convert it to experience into a resume. So that's kind of how I would look at that.
Want to weigh in on that question? I have a few more that I'm going to start getting into the Q&A.
Just to piggyback off that, I think people just need to be open to both. There need to be opportunities for paid and unpaid. As Jason just mentioned, sometimes you will have to take an unpaid position. Of course, everybody wants to be paid. And we must realize that our friends at predominantly white schools likely have parents that own hotels and various other businesses where they are being paid throughout the summer to work at different internships. So going back to what Todd said earlier, one of those individuals need to bring along a minority friend to get paid, and we stop the cycle. I mean, slowly but surely we end this cycle, and students can get paid for internships, but we do have to be very open-minded.
Now, there was a question posed directly to you, Ms. Eris. What are the processes that you are taking with companies to ensure that they're making this type of change? And I think that's just from being in your role at the NAACP.
Overall, we are in a period of discovery. And when I say discovery, we obviously have a number of companies that we partner with year after year. But in this moment that we're in, for the last, 22 days, we have a number of new partners that we are working with and figuring out the next steps. Those companies have released statements about what it is that they're doing. So it's up to us to hold those companies accountable, figure out what the partnership looks like so that it's a win-win for the company as well as for the NAACP, and hold them accountable. And there are so many companies. We're in this conversation every single day about what to do next and how to do it. But it's not about forgetting this moment, tomorrow or the next day. We have to continue this moment and make sure that there is real change and measurements so that we can measure that change. We can't go back to where we were. The time is now. We're all motivated to get it done. So we've got to just continue and make it happen.
Thank you. Todd, really quick. So with you being in Los Angeles, what advice do you have for associations who really desire to make changes and cultivate a more diverse membership where everyone can feel, welcome and valued and respected?
I think it's about, making it clear that you are open for participation from those members, from those individuals. Do some outreach, do targeted and specific outreach. If you really want your membership base and your association to be diverse, go out and do that specific targeted outreach. And make yourself known as being a place that is welcoming and inviting for people of color. And one way to do that is to diversify your board. If the membership is not reflective of that, then at least your board members, your board leadership is and can start to help make some of that outreach.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody have a weigh in on that question? I know I posed it to Todd, but I want to kind of keep that one open too.
I agree with Todd.
Okay. Thank you. Miss Yvonne, with your planning of like the massive festivals and things of that nature, a question I was asked is, if our events are geared towards our audience, and if it's predominantly a white audience, how do we incorporate a more diverse culture and kind of help that audience bring a little bit more awareness to it?
Yeah, so I mean, in anything I do, because I'm a Black woman, I'm going to make sure that it's diverse. So even if I'm targeting, a white audience, I mean, white audiences, they like our culture, they like our performers, they like our hosts, they like our music. So I'm going to infuse, who I am in everything that I do. And then in terms of, the people that are coming into the room, I often try to, go out to my list that I have and include them and invite them into those spaces as well. So just because I'm a Black woman, I'm going to always make sure that my culture is represented, and, and other cultures are represented in things that I do. So yeah, so I just infuse it, but we add the cool factor, in my opinion.
Got it. Miss Eris, I know that you had to jump off. It is 3:00, but I wanted to, let you say your final words, and I want to thank you for taking out some time being able to join us.
Thank you so much. I am actually good, Morgan, until the end.
Great.
I'm good for a few more minutes, so
okay.
I don't have to jump off right at this moment.
Awesome. Okay, so Jason, I have a question for you. Someone asked, how can we be more proactive in getting on lists or creating lists for venues and CVBs as someone who represents the CVB?
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
How are we able to be more proactive in having minorities on lists or creating lists for venues and CVBs?
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so I think, again, you have to, so first there has to be a intentional strategy or request from the CVB to ensure that they are identifying minority businesses, Black, brown, or LGBTQ, however you want to define the diversity is. Okay. Second, I think too, CVBs have to be overly involved in their communities where they are partnering with the chambers, the ethnic chambers, et cetera, that have the list of all these organizations that could be used when conventions come in. So there's oftentimes where there are partnerships where you have cross memberships. Mm-hmm. So I would advocate for that. If your CVB doesn't have one, I would encourage them to do one and work with your chamber to ensure that that president is represented on the board of the CVB to make sure there's some alignment there too. So I think that's the easiest way to do it, to encourage the chamber to have discussion and or just meet with your CV representatives and tell them that you want an identified list of minority vendors and you want to be on it. So again, you'll really find that some CVBs welcome the community involvement. So if you just come in with and have say you want to do it, they may say, "Hey, can you help us do it?" I mean that's kind of how they are. So I would just encourage you to speak up, as I would anyone. Just speak up. Just speak your truth.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna flip the switch just quickly. There are a lot of those in the chat that are asking how to become better allies for us during this time. We are in a time where we have been in a pandemic, so everyone's at home and we're still, and now our eyes are open a little bit more. We were perhaps maybe blind a little bit at first, but now it's in our face. It's on CNN, Twitter, Instagram, every platform you could think about. So how is it that we have colleagues who are in our industry that don't look like us, but want to be a better ally to us and kind of stand with us, for a sense, not just a statement, but really want to learn and stand with us? How can we encourage them and keep them as better allies? Anybody?
I think I'll start. I mean, anybody who's watching this, I'd welcome, anyone to have a conversation. I would, obviously if outside was open, I'd say let's meet for coffee, but we could do a virtual coffee and, and get to know, more about, my business and what I'm doing and how we can work together if there are any synergies. And it doesn't mean necessarily you giving me, a job or, an event or anything like that. It could just be sharing of resources. So I would welcome anyone, to, connect on LinkedIn or connect in some way so that we can further the conversation.
Sure. Ms. Eris?
Absolutely, I agree. It's always good for good people to know good people. So we need to expand on our networks. And just going back to what we've said over the last hour, bring people in and have the correct conversations. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay.
I would say be authentic. There are some white folks who will fight harder than black people. So I think we got to be honest with that. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm disrespecting anybody, but y'all be all right. So I think there are folks who are going to stand with us toe to toe when others won't, because they may be scared and or not certain if it's going to have it's going to reflect badly on their professional life. So I think one, you got to be authentic. Two, speak up when you are in rooms that are not diverse. Question when you see irregularities and disparities within resources. And I think lastly, influence people with access that you have access to do the right thing. And I think those are things you don't have to call me, just do that and I'll be in the room eventually.
Todd, did you want to weigh in on that?
No.
Okay, and then lastly, there's another question. So with the topic of being more diverse, I know that we're talking mainly about African Americans, but when I want to expand it into people of color and diverse women, LGBTQ, things of that nature, how can we, as an entire industry, continue to push through the door? I feel personally that sometimes doors are shut on the diverse group because it may be seen that we don't want to produce bigger shows, we don't bring enough money, even though Jason has given us the statistic that we do. But it's almost as like sometimes the door is so closed because our industry may or may not be ready for that. But do we get a tractor and push the door through? Do we jump through a window? I don't know what other avenue to have that, because we're producing more and more events. Once we're able to be more face to face and not just virtually, there are so many different organizations that are wanting to go to big cities, but because those cities are not really ready for what that organization has to offer, it's kind of like, well, maybe we just shouldn't put the event on anyway. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
So here's what I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to say that we should be collaborative and work within the process that is stated, using the same model, and hopefully we get some traction. What I want to say is what traditionally, particularly in our organization, all of our groups were created because we couldn't get into the other groups. So now you have those groups trying to get into our groups because we have proven the ROI. We have been sophisticated in the political alignment and changing legislation. We have moved the needle with workforce development as relates to the overall overarching policies. And most of the doors that have been kicked in from these organizations that were isolated 100 years ago, some of the churches 200 years ago, frankly, are essentially benefiting everybody. And if we had not have stepped up and pushed through, the minority groups that we're speaking of wouldn't have the same policies of which we currently enjoy now. So I think there has to be some type of atonement first, and then we have to be okay with, we tried the way that you suggested, now we're going to create our own. And we got to show our ROI and believe in that, and then show you what you missed. And then we have to decide if we want to collaborate or move forward. And I think that's a personal decision based off entrepreneurship, organization's missions, and the very conscience or soul of an employee within an organization.
Okay. Miss Yvonne, did you want to?
I think Jason really hit it on the head. So I agree with him completely. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else? I have maybe one more question and then we're going to wrap it up here. So lastly, how do we address an unconscious bias? We're in a large industry. where, as Jason had mentioned, sometimes we start in the role of cook or house cleaner. But if there are organizations that are looking to find more Black talent outside of the Chamber of Commerce, for me, I would suggest just going out and looking up those universities that offer the hospitality industry degree program and see if there are specifically any students of color. That would be my suggestion. But what other suggestions do you all have for those that are in the chat box?
Well, I think you got to understand what again, be deliberate in what you're asking for, what you're seeking. Be honest with yourself with the self-assessment or audit of what the ask is and what the current state is. Be able to present it in a way where even if you were hearing yourself, it would make sense to you to invest in, whether that's your time or resources to solve a problem. I think you also have to, Eris stated a while ago, broaden your circle of influence where you have more people at the table that may have resources or access that you have not thought about yet or tapped into. And then be innovative in the ways that you are connecting to the various groups of people of which you are seeking to convert into hospitality professionals. I think that's and you have to have some type of way to communicate or a platform where it resonates that you are interested in their skill set and why they should work for you or work for the organization in question. I think those are very simple processes that the infrastructure can be set up. It's just the content and context, I think, is what the argument is on and who creates that. And that's where the diversity around the table has to be, from the thought process, from the experiences, access, and who has the power to do the inside and outside game of applying pressure at the same time implementing strategy.
Thank you. Ms. Yvonne?
I think, you know, back to Jason's point is really being deliberate about, you know, what you're looking for. Because so many times, you know, people say, well, I didn't know where to look. I couldn't find someone, and we're out here. So you just have to really be deliberate and intentional about, you know, what your needs are and go out of your circle. Yes, you may not know them right in your circle, but, you know, I always say, like, when someone's reaching out to me, I was like, I might not know them, but I know somebody who does. So, you know, I'm always asking people for different resources. So it's really just being deliberate and intentional about, you know, what you want.
Okay. Eris?
I agree. It is definitely about being deliberate. And I can't stress enough having access and opportunity. Having access to the right individuals so that you are given the opportunity that you need to succeed. And that's what we talked about throughout this hour. So it's so important for going forward in anything.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said, and just to give a concrete, you know, tool is, excuse me, the Black Table. I was sharing that earlier. You need to check us out. There's other organizations and groups that exist out there as well, but you can follow us on Instagram or on our website, The Black Table. But as a starting point, at the very least, and for those professionals who are Black that are looking to connect with other Black event professionals, you know, we're creating that forum and that space to be able to have that dialogue and those conversations and to help connect resources and opportunities. And for organizations and corporations that want to try to identify excellence in the Black event industry, you know that you can come to the Black Table. We're going to help find and refer, give you that as a resource. So, and there are ways to connect with various professionals in the industry. And as we see this moment of our country having a wake-up call, you know, go out and actively, like Yvonne said, do your research and be deliberate, but there are resources and tools and people out there.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
The topic of, you know, first of all, I want to thank BizBash for, you know, providing us with this platform. And, you know, as someone in the event space, I would always look at BizBash, you know, and look at everyone in there. And, you know, I felt like they needed to know me. And so I reached out, a couple years ago and was like, let me sit down with you. Let me introduce you. Let me talk about my credentials. And and ever since then, I've had a great relationship where BizBash has covered some of my events. I've been invited to speak on this platform. So, I applaud them for doing this, but my point is that sometimes you just got to reach out and let people know you're there. And so that's what I did with BizBash, and that's what I've done with other organizations. I think it's important for people to, if you're not on a list somewhere, just reach out and make sure that they know you exist.
Sure.
I want to piggyback on what Yvonne was saying, is that's a great point. And this is no means to just overly, I wasn't paid to say this, but I will say BizBash has been a really great resource for me in my career over the last decade specifically. And there's a lot of organizations and publications that can cover or not cover things. And so, to Yvonne's point, important to reach out and let them know what you're doing and have them cover your event, send them information. And this is the opportunity for BizBash to be held accountable as well. We're going to be engaging, and if you're creating this opportunity, this platform for us to be seen and to be featured, then, we appreciate that, but we've got to also hold them accountable as well, but provide them with the opportunity, provide them with the information to know about this amazing event you're producing. Or if you know about another great vendor who does AV or something, and see if they're on the national supplier resource list, get them the information to be part of that and lists like that. I think it's important to take what is there and use that to our benefit.
Awesome. Now, I know we're drawing near the time, and before we conclude, I just would like to go around and ask all of our panelists to give your final thoughts of highlighting Black voices and people of color, their voices in our industry. Eris, would you like to start?
Sure. As people of color, Black people in this industry, we need to continue to be creative, be resilient, and be determined. We must ask, as Jason mentioned earlier, we must ask for what we want and be very intentional about that. We can't expect anyone to give us anything. So once we have a seat at the table, use your voice. And just continue to be the collaborative leaders that you are. But we must continue down this road to make space, as we know we all need to make space.
Miss Yvonne, your final thoughts?
What Eris, I agree with what you said, Eris, and I think that sharing of resources. One thing that I feel that through COVID as a community, as a Black community, is that I have found that people have reached out to me like, hey, do you know how I can do this or this? So sharing of resources within our own community is really important. What you said, Todd, is like, if there's not a vendor that's out there that people don't know of, if you can use your platform, do so. And that's what I try to do with my platform is share, information on others. But I think to just be collaborative and, make sure that, we're sharing information and helping each other, because to Eris's point, nobody's going to give us anything. So, and then also, as I said earlier, is just make sure you're ready. If you do get that call, make sure you have, everything you need to get the job done, because,
Sure.
If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
I know that's right. Todd?
I would say it's important to also take action, because a lot of what we see around us is a result of us not taking greater action. Okay. And I mean that in the sense of, we can't just sit and complain about the way things are. I mean that as humans, as a society. But a lot of times, I think we underestimate our voices and our influence as an event industry. And so what I mean by that is, get involved in your community, get involved in your local community, get involved in your professional association. It's the time to join the Chamber of Commerce and join the industry association and join the neighborhood council and get involved with knowing what and who is on your ballot, and go to the polls and register folks to vote. Like, we forget that action is so critical. We can't really make important change without taking that level of action. And it can't always just be about our jobs and what we're doing personally and professionally, but what is happening in our community as a whole. So, you know, get to the polls, register folks, help those who are going to have their votes suppressed, because that will happen. The NAACP has a million amazing resources, but take action.
Absolutely.
Jason, your final thoughts?
Yeah, so again, you know, we got to walk in our power. We got to walk in our power. I see tourism as an entity that I want to say helps and influences the community locally, nationally, regionally, et cetera. And then once you understand that events employ people, events reinvest tax dollars, events and conventions help businesses with revenue opportunities, and that money trickles down into the local economy, I think you really understand your value, right? So again, I think once you understand your value, walk in your power, be unapologetically ready to lead in a discussion and activate whatever you're doing. And lastly, join the National Coalition of Black Media Professionals.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, we are out of time, but I want to thank everybody on this panel for taking time out again to sit with me and chat and answer the pivotal questions that we've had today. We all appreciate your time and your insights. I would also like to thank all of those for viewing, for joining us as well. We hope that you continue to have these important conversations, take action in both our industry, your own personal companies, as well as in your day-to-day life with your friends that may not look like you, but continue to have these important conversations. I'd like to thank David Adler, our founder and chairman of BizBash, Matt Johnson, our president, and all of my teammates that are here helping me on the back end. I appreciate you so very much. Again, thank you everyone for coming out. I pray that you all have a blessed day. Happy Monday, and stay safe out here. Have a good one, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.